Thank you so much, Noreen, and everyone for having me with you this morning. I have a brief presentation with a couple of videos to show you all to give you a real bird's eye look of that's happening on the border. And a visual aid is worth more than all of the words that I can possibly share with you this morning. I'm going to share my screen and share the presentation with you, and feel free to ask questions as I'm going through. Can everyone see that? I hope so. If you can't see it, give me a shout. So as Noreen mentioned, I am the director of our Border Rights Project, which is based in Tijuana, and our work covers both what's happening with asylum seekers in Mexico, as well as beyond, those who are making the route up, as well as asylum seekers who are just have immediately crossed the border in an open air detention sites in San Diego County. Noreen did a great job of introducing our work. I'm just going to add a couple of things. As she mentioned, we are binational. On the north side of the border, we're working with immigrants in California that are both detained as well as non-detained. And we're also working with immigrants in the southeastern United States in Louisiana, Mississippi, Georgia. We have a small project out there because often people who come through the border get sent to the southeastern United States. It's a really difficult place to have an asylum case be heard, especially when you're in detention. Our Border Rights Project in Tijuana, we provide in-person legal orientation, both in our office once a week, and then a few other times a week we go out to shelters throughout Baja California, not just in Tijuana, but also in Mexicali and Ensenada. And we provide legal orientation and give an opportunity for people to ask their individual questions. And of those cases that we might be identifying, we will identify people who are even more vulnerable than the average asylum seeker. Maybe they have a medical vulnerability, maybe they're an unaccompanied minor, maybe they're a member of the LGBTQ community, and we might be able to accompany them a bit further in their quest to seek asylum and have their human rights respected. We also conduct human rights monitoring at the U.S. Port of Entry, where we're basically watching the watchers, CBP and Mexican Immigration and National Guard, and how they're interacting with asylum seekers and perhaps violating their rights. We also have online legal orientation. We have a TikTok channel that has now over 100,000 followers, and we have Know Your Rights content in 19 different languages. This is something people can access on from their own phones, but we also show these videos with our partners at 24 migrant shelters in Colombia, Guatemala, and Mexico. This is really important, especially in terms of indigenous languages, because if you look at individuals who may have died while in Border Patrol custody, particularly children, many of them were indigenous and couldn't communicate with the people that had them in custody about their medical challenges. And finally, all this information of working with individuals and communities, we take all of this data and we use it to sue the government through a variety of different styles of lawsuits. So this is, second. This is just a snapshot of what it looks like with people who are waiting. This particular shelter in the photo, you can see people are sleeping in tents. There's a leak in the roof. It's during the raining season, and there is a lot of water coming into the living space that's going to, if not has already, flood those tents. So people are in a variety of different shelters. Some are actually worse than this. Some people are sleeping in abandoned cars, cardboard boxes on the streets, or outdoor encampments. There's high rates of violence against asylum seekers in Mexico by authorities as well as organized crime. And most migrants lack access to medical care, mental health treatment, employment where they're not exploited, stable housing. They're battling with food security, and a fair number of them are having to change their location every so often because the people that are persecuting them are hot on their trail. Oops. So the only way right now that a person can access the asylum process at the port of entry is if they go and make an appointment using this smartphone application called CBP-1. The app has a lot of problems. Some of them are that it's only available in 3 languages, not French, Haitian Creole, English, and Spanish. So if you speak another language, and a lot of asylum seekers speak another language, it's a very diverse place, the border, you're going to have a hard time accessing that system. It's difficult for people to navigate if they're not tech savvy, if they don't have a phone that has a new enough operating system to support the app. There's no accommodations for people who have disabilities. And if that was not even, worse, there's also system-wide glitches, outages that can take the course over days where people are just unable to use the app. And then there's a limited number of appointments per day that does not reflect any way the actual processing capacity of CBP at ports of entry. For example, at the San Ysidro port of entry, there's a processing capacity of around 800 persons that they can have there at one time. And there's only around 300 to 400 appointments that are available at that port of entry per day. So that leads to people who have to wait as long as 9 months before they can even access the asylum process. Unaccompanied minors, this photo is some of the unaccompanied minors that we have accompanied over the last year. They're not allowed to make a CBP-1 appointment. If they try to make an appointment, the system won't allow them to advance. However, they technically have the right to present themselves at a port of entry. But when they try to do that, they are routinely told to pick rocks, scram, go away. CBP does not process them upon walk up. And very often Mexican immigration, which is at the port of entry pretty much all the time, will intercept them and then turn them over to child welfare officials with the DEEF. That's the name of the child welfare agency. They will languish for months and sometimes years in orphanage, foster home type situations because there's no one to get them out of custody. Last year in 2023, AOL accompanied 312 unaccompanied minors to the port of entry and forced CBP to let them in. That includes minors from Mexico, minors from El Salvador, Guatemala, Haiti, Afghanistan, and several countries from the African continent. What happens when people who try to present themselves at a port of entry don't have a CBP-1 appointment? Most people will try to go and have a conversation with a CBP officer and they will be turned away. I'm going to play a short video for you right now, which is audio of one of those incidents. The audio is from a plaintiff in a recent lawsuit that we filed last year against CBP for this very thing, for turning asylum seekers away who don't have a CBP-1 appointment. Let me just share that with you. Change screen. Where'd it go?
Ayúdame, por favor, mi vida corre peligro. Por favor, ayúdame. Necesitamos entrar. Por favor, me apego a pedir asilo.
Diego worked for the Mexican government, where he witnessed corruption. When he refused to participate, he was assaulted and a victim of an attempted kidnapping. Facing threats by his government colleagues and members of organized crime, Diego and his wife had to flee. Nowhere in Mexico was safe anymore.
Oficial, soy mexicano y ocupo las ayudas. De favor, me apego a pedir asilo político en las leyes de Estados Unidos. Por favor.
When Diego first reached the U.S. border, he thought he'd be able to seek asylum. Diego didn't know the government was using a new smartphone app called CBP-1 to schedule appointments for asylum, and they were turning people away if they showed up at the border without one. To be clear, under US law, people have a right to ask for protection, whether they have an appointment or not. Still, border officers turned Diego away. Diego and his wife were then forced to go into hiding in Tijuana. They tried to book an appointment, but CPB-1 required them to list a mailing address in the US. They'd just fled their home. They didn't have a new address yet. So Diego sought help from the organization Otro Lado, which got them food and shelter. Then an attorney accompanied Diego and his wife to the border and told the U.S. officer everything they had been through. But the officer didn't want to hear Diego's story. He told Diego to go away and instead ask Mexican immigration officers, agents of the very government he's running from, for help with CPB-1, an app created and run by the U.S. government.
So you speak to the Mexican immigration official.
He's a Mexican citizen. He can't speak with a Mexican immigration official.
Oficial,
That's what they're there for.
oficial.
Not
soy
for
mexicano.
Mexican citizens, sir.
Oficial, soy mexicano y ocupo las ayudas. De favor.
Diego's story
Nicole, you're still muted.
Sorry, can you hear me now? I'll assume yes.
Yes.
Okay. For those of you who are wondering to know the end of that story, Diego did make it into California when we filed our lawsuit. But that is happening to asylum seekers every single day, including Mexican asylum seekers like Diego who are fleeing the Mexican government. They are trapped in a country where they fear persecution, which is contrary to both international asylum law and asylum law as it is incorporated into US federal law. I'm going to go back and share my screen. People who refuse to leave the port of entry, who insist on being processed, they are often threatened with or detained by Mexican immigration or National Guard if they are not Mexican citizens, and then they could be deported back to their home country or just removed to further away from the border, just get them, down to southern Mexico, and then they'll have to make the journey again if they even make it. And then some people who just can't wait. They can't wait 7-9 months. They will enter without inspection, and that means crossing in between ports of entry. And if they are apprehended, they will usually be transported to one of the open air detention sites. This is an example of one of the open air detention sites. They are throughout San Diego County, mainly in the desert near Jacumba and the Otay Mountain Wilderness Range. Mexican National Guard on the Mexico side will frequently assault and rob migrants that are trying to cross before they can get to the camps, as well as organized crime. Sometimes there's not really a big difference between Mexican National Guard or organized crime. The only food, water, medical supplies, tents, tarps, anything, first aid that people at the open air detention sites get is from NGOs like AOL and mutual aid groups in the community. And unsurprisingly, 2 people have died as a result of conditions in the camps since September, including a child. Border Patrol doesn't let anybody leave the camps. And in fact, they tell people who are trying to leave the camps that if they do, they will be arrested and then immediately sent back to their home country. And I have just a little bit of video to show you what's happening at the camps and share with you a recent victory. We filed challenges to these open air detention camps and have received a favorable ruling about children, including children traveling with their families. They have to be processed quickly out of those camps instead of letting them stay there and languish for days.
Sorry, Nicole, one more time. You're muted again.
I'm never gonna get this right. I have one more opportunity. So although that was a big win for us to get the federal court to rule that these children are technically in Border Patrol custody and they are entitled to the same legal protections as any other child in immigration custody, which means they've got to be processed expeditiously. You can't let them to freeze to death on a desolate mountaintop with no food or water. And it's shocking that our government would try to fight us on that point, but here we are. So we did have that win, but they are still allowed to keep single adults in these facilities. And that is the fight we're working on right now, just to close these sites down entirely. One of the other things that we've been seeing in the last year or so is family separation, different than the family separation we saw under Trump, focusing on adults. But since September, we've tracked over 1,400 cases of family separation at the border and helped over 1,500 of those family members find their lost loved ones. So families that entered Border Patrol custody in as a family unit were then released to the streets of San Diego, sometimes on different days, and we were able to help them reunite in different locations. But sometimes family members would be shipped off to ICE custody to Southeast Louisiana, to Mississippi. And in some cases, some of those family members that they separated were deported back to their country of origin. As a result of these family separations, AOL, along with partner organizations like Jewish Family Services and San Diego ACLU, filed a civil rights complaint challenging these separations, and we're waiting for a response on that. We have also been doing advocacy before the United Nations Working Group on Enforced Disappearances, which is a working group that focuses on disappearances of human beings by the governments of which they are subject to, arguing that these family separations and disappearing people into this black hole of CBP and ICE custody without giving any information to family members or attorneys, such as ourselves, because we make inquiries in every single case that we identify, qualifies as an enforced disappearance by a state and violates international law. So that's just kind of a snapshot of what's going on. That's a lot of really depressing information. So in order to close out my presentation, I want to give you something positive, because ultimately, we have to believe that another world that welcomes refugees is possible. I'm going to share this video with you of a young child that we accompanied to the port of entry. Her mother had not seen her in 4 years. Her mother had left Haiti because of the violence, but she couldn't take her daughter. The daughter stayed behind with a grandparent who became unable because of illness to care for the child, and everything going on with Haiti at this moment just was unsafe for this girl child to remain. So she migrated with family friends who came to the border. They got CBP1 appointments, she did not. And so we walked her up to the port of entry, fought with CBP for her to get in. She went to a shelter for migrant kids for a few weeks before she could be reunited with her mom. And so this is a video. This is not the only video that our clients send us of this nature. This is a video that her mom sent. She had put on social media and sent to us just to show us what this reunification looks like. So imagine you have a child, you have a mother, and you have not seen them in 4 years, and you weren't even sure if you were going to see them again because of all the violence that has been happening all around you.
Nicole, I can't see anything on our end. Maybe you could share the screen, I guess, in a different way. Thank you.
What was that?
We weren't able to see the video on our end.
Hold on, let's see. Can you see it now?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. All right, so let me speed it up a little bit. Okay.
Expérience moins à bon Dieu, bata supposé tout est, qu'aime pas sauter parce que, ça doit midi, yeah, ça doit midi, nanana.
Sorry, Nicole, just one more time.
I'm the worst at technology. That was my last video, my last slide. Thank you so much for your attention this morning, and inviting me to speak. And I just want to put out a plug. Those who are interested in volunteering either in Tijuana or our efforts in San Diego, feel free to send an email to either myself or our volunteer coordinator. I'll put that email in the chat.